Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon, wherever you are. Come on in. We invite you to join us for today's webinar. Just want to warm up the group. We know we're hitting you at lunchtime, so we want you to bring your energy, your excitement. It is RPM Careers Week, so we have to be extra pumped up with the energy today. So just welcome. We're going to start in another minute or two to give people a moment to flow in. And then we'll kick it back over to our NAA team to kick us off. Let's light up the chat. Just drop in the chat. Make sure you have your chat turned on to everyone so we can all see your comments. I'm joined here with the amazing Jacora Connor and Vanessa Grayson. And we're going to start in just a moment. Just drop in the chat what city you're joining us from. Happy RPM Careers Week, everyone.
Happy RPM Careers Week!
My friend Stephanie, so great to see you always. Glad to know you're in the room. Wendy, hi to Palm Harbor, Florida. Chris in Orlando, Wilmington.
North Carolina in the house.
Victoria, Cassandra's in Wilmington. Yes, happy RPM Careers Week to you too, Ben. High Point, North Carolina. Hi, Shanna, we see you. Boston in the house. Fayetteville, North Carolina. North Carolina is coming in numbers. Doreen, hello. Jenny, we see you. New Jersey, come on, East Coast. We needed some East Coast people. We love the energy. You know, we are a high energy group. So even though we're not in person, we still got to bring the energy. Oh, awesome. And today, I believe it's DEI Day for RPM Careers Week. So thank you all for all the energy you've shown on social media. We love the hashtags, and we're going to keep that trend going for our session today. So remember, if you hear anything that is postable or tweetable, to use hashtag RPM Careers so that we can acknowledge the content that's shared today. Kansas City, amazing. Yeah, Debbie, great to see you. Vanessa's people. Love it. Well, Stephanie, we're going to turn it back over to you so we can get our session started for today.
All right, perfect. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Unconventional Trailblazers, Creating Leadership Pathways. My name is Stephanie Hurst and I'm the Member Programs Manager here at the National Apartment Association. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping points. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the webinars page of the NAA website early next week. During the discussion, you may type questions into the chat box on your screen and we'll share them with our presenter. And now I will turn it over to DE&I committee member Vanessa Grayson to kick off today's presentation. Vanessa?
Perfect. Well, welcome everyone. We are so excited to have you here and it's such an honor for me to be able to present today's panelists. So we'll first kick it off with Ms. Jacora Connor, voted one of the most influential women of 2021, Jacora continues to make a remarkable impact on the multifamily industry, her local community, and the nation at large. She is driven by the simple yet heartfelt desire to be a light for change. Jacora has been in the multifamily industry over 20 years and is the CEO and founder of Occupancy Heroes Incorporated. She serves on various NAA-EI committees, is a notable trainer, and helps owners increase revenue nationwide. Her apprenticeship program has trained and employed nearly 600 people since 2018. Jacora is a strong advocate for diversity and inclusion and champions affordable housing. The NAA views Jacora as a source of knowledge. Jacora is one of 100 entrepreneurs from across the country invited to the White House to advocate for minority entrepreneurship. Also joining us today, we have Ms. Melissa D. White. Melissa, coined the activator by clients and audiences, has an undeniable ability to activate a room and has an indelible way of tapping in to bring out the best part of you. She is a highly coveted national speaker, sales and marketing strategist, radio host, and social entrepreneur. As a national speaker and trainer, Melissa is a reputable thought leader in the areas of sales and marketing strategies, sales training, learning and development, leadership, and public speaking. She has worked with and been certified by the Dale Carnegie Leadership Institution and holds a bachelor and master's degree in business management, among many leadership and marketing certifications. She has also published various articles on such topics in numerous trade publications and delivered guest lectures at the University of Georgia, Georgia Piedmont College, and Drexel University. We also want to acknowledge Ms. Nicole Salmieri, who cannot be with us today, but played an intricate role in pulling today's panel presentation together as well. So I am so happy to be a part of this and to be able to introduce today's panels, and I will let these lovely ladies get going.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for kicking this off for us. It's always an honor to share with our multifamily family, and especially on this celebratory week for RPM careers. And thank you again to NAAEI for seeing this as a viable topic of unconventional pathways. So one thing about this industry, many of us landed here one way or another, some intentionally, but many just inadvertently. And so in that, we've had to blaze trails that may not have existed before us. So Shakora and I, along with the collective content that we've gathered, invite you to go on a journey with us. Yes, although virtual, we're going to go down some pathways together. And as you listen, we invite you to participate in the chat. Look at it this way. It's a conversation among friends. We're friends, right? So we can talk openly about how we got here and go back and recount maybe some stones and pebbles that we leave behind for others to follow that trail. And here are the 3 pathways that we're going to uncover today. Path number 1, if you choose to accept it, is the path of courage and connection. Path number 2, to cultivate and to train as an unconventional leader. And the 3rd path, communication and legacy. So we know that anytime you're going on a trip, unless you're just as daring and adventurous as me, we tend to map out where we're gonna go. Shakora and I, as good friends in the industry, oftentimes just take off without a plan, just figure it out as we go. And your career may have felt that way for some of you. Can anybody agree? Just drop yes in the chat if you're like, I had no clue what I signed up for in multifamily, but I figured it out along the way. Well, we may have had people to at least guide us along the way, but we had to cultivate what worked for us. So being an unconventional leader means that we're disrupting the status quo. We may not take the same path or vehicles as others because they were figuring it out as well. And so the next generation of leaders is looking to us to chart out a plan, pathways that they can follow, and we can bring them along. So we invite you to help us do that today. So Shakora is going to share with us path number 1 of leading with courage and compassion.
Thank you, Melissa. Lead with courage. To lead with emotional courage takes self-awareness, compassion, connection, trust, honesty, and accountability. These are all essential traits for any leader. They may also be some of the most important skills to master if you ever want to be called a trailblazer. With self-awareness, you can probe your emotions in any given situation to understand what you're feeling and why. This is key for understanding how to appropriately respond rather than impulsively react to a situation that may be going in a negative direction. It's also key to leading with your own emotional courage. Before you do that, right, I suggest that you take a moment to really look at yourself and identify your own not so favorable traits, and then pull others and ask them to speak truth to you, because we have to be able to accept our flaws and have the ability to accept corrective criticism, constructive criticism, right? So true leadership requires courage, a willingness to peel back those onions and own your own uglier layers. In doing so, you'll create a safe space for your peers to help. And I've found that commitment to leading with emotional courage requires openness and vulnerability, being open to feedback, but also certain levels of curiosity and humility. Okay, it requires us to be humble, in other words. So number 1, openness and vulnerability. The pandemic it hasn't done anything. It has forced leaders to embrace vulnerability and showcase a new level of humanity in the workforce. By sharing what you're struggling with, asking for help, and being transparent, your team will follow suit. And together you can work towards creative solutions more effectively and efficiently. What team members are looking for these days is a fully accessible human being as a leader. And the pandemic created a crash course on all of that. Okay, how to be vulnerable, empathy, all those things should guide principles into our leadership styles. And leaders were forced to understand and navigate how the pandemic impacted themselves and their teams. This led for like self-disclosure and acting with compassion, which in turn led to better results. Now, being open to feedback. One of the toughest tests for a leader is being open to feedback because this requires emotional intelligence. And both take a great deal of emotional courage to pull off. So good managers ask their peers and respected individuals, tough questions like, how am I doing as a manager? And then they listen. And then once they listen, they take in that honest feedback so they can grow into future leaders. And as managers, the key is acting on the feedback that you receive. This shows employees that you care about what they have to say. This sets the tone that, is needed, that is going to come from you with the issues, questions, and concerns. They'll be heard. They need to know that they're taken seriously and things are being addressed appropriately. Curiosity. Now, this was a big one for me. In 2019, Bill Gates spoke to students, parents, and alumni at his high school in Seattle. And one of the questions that was posed to Gates was, what are the skills today's students need to know to thrive in the world of 2030 and 2040, right? I thought that was like an amazing question. And this came from a student. Gates stressed the critical importance of curiosity as a framework for acquiring knowledge, a growth mindset for foundation, and the drive to stay curious and keep learning. So not only is curiosity key to the learning process, but it's also great for overall life satisfaction. According to science, several research studies suggest that curious people have better relationships, connect better, and enjoy socializing more. In fact, other people are saying that it's more easily for them to be attracted and feel better with people who are curious. Okay, so, if you want to be out there and be social, be curious. Humility. Okay, which is a big one that people don't think about, but we're all attracted to confidence and leaders, right? But take one wrong step and you find arrogance, which is not a good thing. So let's enter the world of humility and being humble, shall we? The best leaders direct their ego away from themselves to the larger goal of leading their company to greatness. These leaders gain an edge through displaying both fierce professional will and extreme personal humility. Mixing the two will ultimately create superb financial results and great relationships. Humble leaders achieve greatness without arrogance. They shift from ego to humility, which can drastically alter the outcome to their advantage. Okay. So, as the saying goes, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. So, humble leaders give others credit. Let's remember that. Leaders who deflect the limelight away from them and allow their teams to be in the limelight gain respect at an alarming rate. There is something very liberating for employees when they receive credit. Humble leaders speak from the heart. Humble leaders refocus refuse to cut corners, and they'll speak the truth. They don't say things to sugarcoat it. They don't try to please others, and they don't try to look good in front of their peers. They don't betray themselves or others by using words or making decisions that are not aligned with who they are. All right, let's keep that in mind. When they make a promise, they do everything possible to fulfill it, and they make their word their bond. Humble leaders admit mistakes. I'm going to give you 3 magical words, okay? That's going to bring you so much peace. The first one, I was wrong. And I'm going to give you another 3. You are right. Okay. If we just learned as leaders how to say this and how to mean it, it would bring us so much peace. Humble leaders are teachable. Leaders in healthy organizations gladly accept the role of leaders because they know it will make them better. They know that each person has something important, it has something to teach them. And the truth is, good leaders don't always know what's needed. So you got to ask questions and you've got to take those answers. So it's very important, right? If you're a manager and you're going in and it's got long-term employees there, you need to start with being honest and say, hey, I need help. Can you help me? And they will respect you more for that. Okay. Humble leaders listen to understand first. Effective communication isn't just about talking. It's also about the ability to listen and to understand what's happening on the other side of the highway. And Brenda Anderson and I did a session last year about this. If you go to the DNI webinar portal, check it out. It's amazing. There is some great information in there. There's so many webinars. You guys got to go there and just take a look. Take a look at it. It's presented by the NAA. It's on the website. And just, I'm going to leave this. Humble leaders will listen with meaning and understanding what the other person's needs in mind. The listening has one key differentiator. There we go, right? How can I help another person, right? This is what's going to make you different. So let's keep that in mind. We can go to the next slide, Melissa. Okay, and forgive me, my screen is moving a little slow. So now this book here was presented to me by Nicole Salmary, who is not here today, but it has been great. Okay, read that book. I just took some snippets of it and it's just wonderful. So the difference between being a diminisher and a multiplier gets twice the capabilities, okay, uses intelligence to amplify the intelligence of others. All right, so just keep that in mind, more than twice, and studies have shown this. And we must amplify leaders or we're going to destroy them. That's what a diminisher is. So think about yourself right now, right? Just take a step back, think about yourself and think, do you bring the best out of people or do you cause them to shut down? That's a heavy question, because it's asking you truth. It's asking you to really look at yourself, okay? And did you know that the change of command can bring in a change of capabilities? And the reason why, I know I've witnessed it myself, the reason why is because some leaders are diminishers and some are multipliers. We can be smart and we can be our best. We can have the best leaders around us, right? That can bring out the best, but then we've got leaders who create doubt in ourselves and causes the employees to hold back. So this is where we're at, right? So why would some leaders amplify and why would others drain? Some of the reasons why because you got to ask, do you show confidence? Right? Are you showing them that you have confidence in them? Are you pointing out the good? Are you encouraging them? Are you being dismissive? So I want us to just take a moment to think about two leaders that we've worked with, okay? One of them that diminished you and one that was a multiplier. So just take a moment to think about that. And let's focus on the diminisher first. And if you would, just write this down in the chat, okay? Just what did they do that diminished you? And I'm not sure who's checking the chat, but I can't see it on my end.
So we're
I'll monitor the chat.
Yeah, Vanessa's watching the chat.
Okay, so as any of those come up, what do diminishers do? And then we can look at the multiplier, right? Because that's easier. What a leader that we've worked with that has multiplied us. You know, what did they do to amplify your intelligence? And if you can write that down in the chat.
All right.
Melissa, I'll ask you. Oh, you see someone responded?
Yes, ma'am. We've got made fun of me and the team. A bully boss thought he was funny and that he was and that his way was to bond. taking credit for the work that was done by someone else. Melissa's got criticized openly.
Wow. Wow. That's got to be hard. Melissa, do you have any on those? Have you ever worked with a diminisher?
Yeah, and I think diminishers, maybe I'm more of an optimist. I don't believe leaders set out to diminish. They may really believe at the heart of it that they're doing the right thing in how they give criticism, how they work with people. But I think it's very important to see how we're received as leaders. Because we can have the best of intentions, but if it's not received well or done in offense, we have to be brave, going back to the path of courage, being brave enough to look at the perspective of our teams and adjust. Bravery, like you said, and honesty. Yeah, Ben says it can be accidental. Absolutely. But here's the unconventional part. An unconventional leader is one who acknowledges it, like you said, Jakora. I was wrong, you were right, and then showing the adjustment through action and express empathy and emotion. And that's how you tie it together. And then you change, you shift from being a diminisher to a multiplier through repeated action. So when you do that over time, that's now changing the reputation and how you receive. And we'll get to this later, but it also reframes your leadership legacy. So that's a good question, Jakora.
Absolutely. Now I'd like to know, for all of those who wrote it down in the chat and for those who didn't, just think about it. On a scale from 1 to 100, what percentage of your capabilities did those leaders get? The diminisher versus the multiplier. And when we're talking about capabilities, we're not talking about how hard you worked, right? Keep in mind, we're talking about how much of your capabilities, your skills, your brain power, what did they really get from you? 100 being 100%, they got it all. And 1 being they got nothing at all. What did they get from you? Let's see what that brings us. Do we have any results there?
Yeah, we're getting, for the diminisher, we're getting 40 to 50%, but definitely not full capacity. I see some 80, 75, never tapped into my full potential because they were always in charge trying to bulldoze over me.
Wow. So the truth is here. We see this. And like Melissa said, you got to look at yourself, knowing this, knowing what it takes to be a multiplier and knowing what it is to be a diminisher. Are you being an accidental diminisher? You have to ask yourself, when you set out to be a trailblazer, these are the tough questions that you have to ask yourself. You know, do you show encouragement? Are you being open, or is it just your opinion that counts? Just like we said in the chat there, you know, was that it? Does your opinion, is that the only thing that matters? Do you give people space and allow them to work on their own? Because, you know, we can have some really amazing people, and then we just say, well, we want you to do this, and we're right there, right? Do we step away and give them space? And do we explain why, or do we just give the task and walk away? Because when people understand, when they're invested, then they'll do a much better job. And that's when you become a multiplier.
That's phenomenal. Well, thank you, Jakora, for wrapping that up for us. The comments are amazing. I like seeing kind of the range of what was given. I want to point out a few of my favorites before we talk about how to shift your head and your heart from being a diminisher to a multiplier. And Jennifer said 100. I gave 100%, but because I could never please them, I sought other employment. So given where we are in today's climate and economy of people leaving, this is important to look at. Are they giving at the best of their capacity and the best of their ability? And are we acknowledging that, or are they leaving because it's not valued and recognized? It's really important. So the way that you do that is to do a head check and a heart check. And I think this is a daily leadership exercise for every unconventional leader. Here's the reality. We're all exceptionally smart and knowledgeable. That's why we're where we are today. But somewhere along the way, has your heart aligned with what you know? All of the certifications we receive, all of the knowledge that we gain, did we disconnect somewhere and leave our heart behind? If you notice in this picture, the heart is a step, just one step before the head, meaning we lead with our hearts. We lead from a place of compassion, understanding, and empathy. Always test what you know against what you feel. We know this in property management, that there are often times when we have to kick in on our senses, where we have to be discerning about decisions to make based on humanity. And that is what's called us to looking at unconventional ways to lead. It's the new standard that, and many of us know this. Let me tell you how I know. It's because we've incorporated into our recruiting efforts personality testing along with skills assessment. No longer is our knowledge base enough to qualify to lead. It's also understanding where we fall on enneagrams, DISC assessments, and other forms of personality assessments on where we fit in the team on the scale of what we know, how we feel, and how we lead. So it's highly important to pair the two. So here's a heart check. When's the last time you absolutely loved something about working with your team? What brought you the most joy about being engaged with your team? And how do you do that more often? Was it stepping outside of your office and actually sitting among the team for a lunch together to learn, to talk? Was it when you stopped, when you were in a hurry and actually had a conversation with someone by their desk about their kid, about family, about travel, whatever it is that you share in common? Was it when you actually were on a site visit and you were so energized remembering how you used to once be that young leasing specialist that was vibrant and full of ideas for your community? When was the last time you felt alive and true joy in what you do? More of that is required to shift from a diminisher to a multiplier so you create more moments like that for your team. A boss has the title, a leader has the people. Have you ever seen those exemplary leaders? I'm talking about the kind that are iconic, meaning they have a name that their reputation precedes them. They're the type of people that if they leave a company, there feels like it's a mass exodus and people follow them wherever they go. I aspire to that type of leadership. There's something to be said about studying that statement of a leader who has the people, meaning not that they're controlling them or they have the fear or reverence of the people, but they have their love, their admiration, their respect. And it is true, respect is earned, it's not given. So how do we accumulate those points of love and respect? It's through what Shakora mentioned about courage, about compassion, and about filling up a bank of courtesy of how can I humanize every action I have? It's double-sided, I get it. We have the job of running multi-million-dollar assets and the operational sides, the mechanics of what we do. But the people management piece is just as, if not more important. How do we marry the two moving forward so that we have a newly prescribed roadmap to leading effectively? And Simon Sinek understood this in this quote. Let's talk about this further. And this is where we want you to light up the chat here. We invite you to join the conversation as Jacora and I just have some rapid fire dialogue about the pathway to courage and connection based on what you heard and your experiences. Like I told you, our goal today is to help you pick which path works for you. So, Jacora, how can you create deeper trust within people that you engage with? You mentioned some points today. Can you maybe share a story or a specific example of where you created deeper trust as a leader? Need you to unmute.
Okay. I think that we do that with honesty. We have to be honest. We have to speak the truth and point out the good and the bad. And most importantly, we have to make our word our bond. So I can just briefly, I deal with a lot of people, bringing them into the industry, educating them on the industry, and maintenance specifically has a hard time, right? Because they are able to go here and there, and it's crazy out here for them. But I'm sure to be honest with them. I point out the flaws. I say, listen, this is the best thing ever. We are amazing, right? This is an industry that's never going to go away. You will always have a job if you're good at what you do, right? But I also point out the negatives. You're going to be on call. If you live on property, you're going to deal with this and you're going to deal with that. And so, but I make sure the positive outweighs negative, because it does, right? And so in doing so, they're prepared and they come ready and they're here for it. They come on board and it's long lasting. So that's one way for sure, because they trust us.
I love that. Vanessa's comment is amazing. Make sure transparency, to the extent that you can give it, of course, that you're comfortable with, is placed at the forefront of your conversations. If you've ever hung out with me long enough or been in one of my sessions, I always talk about the book Radical Candor, which is a guide to how to be open and transparent in a bold way. Antoinette says, transparency. My team understands that I will praise them often and provide constructive feedback quickly. So that's really good. Where in your life can you display more courage?
I'm going to say everywhere, okay? Because displaying courage changes your life, and usually for the better. You know, I'd love to enhance my life in any way possible, you know, from putting down those cupcakes to telling my grandson, no, I can absolutely take in more courage. One thing I'd like to say is that displaying courage can be scary, but more times than not, it's absolutely worth it.
That's good. That's good. For me, I would have to say displaying more courage would be intentionally seeking out least likely relationships, meaning people that I normally would not interact with. I do something very intentionally every week. On Wednesdays, I have a block on my calendar that's called virtual coffee, meaning I set aside a block of time where I intentionally connect with new people on LinkedIn and invite them for virtual coffee. And just to talk. It's not to pitch anything, to learn, like no business. It's just, I want to get to know you. It could be a friend in the industry that I admire, or someone that I see all the time and I just never had a conversation with. And that has yielded some of the deepest, most fruitful relationships. And I put it as a block on my calendar, and it's very fruitful. And that's courageous because I'm extending myself to more people that I don't know. So that's a good tip to follow. The last one, what is the one behavior you can change today to positively impact the hearts and minds? One thing. So let's drop one word in the chat. What's one thing based on this first pathway that you would take away today that you could do a little better or differently?
Be consistent.
Ooh.
Whether you're in public eye or not. Say a thing, do a thing.
That's good. We have some good answers in the chat. Give grace. Oh, Wendy, you're on fire today. Grace. Yes, that's a big one for me. Have Mackenzie said, have courage to stop comparing myself to others and have more confidence. That's so brave. That's a courageous leader answer. That's really good. And then Jennifer also said to deal with the bad, not just the good. Be brave to give a no answer. Yes, no is a very brave word. I had a dear mentor tell me, say no, and that was one of mine. I want to say no more often, but also tell them why, because it's a teachable moment.
Yes.
So unconventional path, as you mentioned, is to teach why or why not, so that it raises up mature leaders and helps cultivate open communication as well. So that's excellent. We're going to now introduce you. Thank you, Jakora, for number one. So pathway number two is to help cultivate and train. So we talked about the heart, let's deal with the brain. Jakora, how do we cultivate and train new leaders on pathway number two?
Identifying talent, training by establishing trust, developing people before skills, and knowing where people are. So I'm going to let you all in on a secret. That secret is that great leaders are also great recruiters. A leader has the ability to see talent before others see it. When looking for leaders, too many of us follow the trends and think that the best leader is the best culture fit. This approach undermines efforts to boost diversity and ultimately hinders creativity and innovation. Okay, always look for leaders within your organization first. You or someone within your organization thought enough of that team member to hire them. So why not look at them first as leaders? So you can always spot leaders when you least expect it. You know, I can't begin to tell you how many people I recruit at the airport. That's pretty much like my second home. I'm always at the airport. And you know, you think I have a buddy pass by now, but I don't. That's probably because I'm snatching them up. But many leaders tend to hire and mentor people who remind them of themselves, right? But we must embrace people who are different from us. I personally would never want to clone myself, okay? Because see, I know that I've got some great attributes, but I also know that I don't possess everything that I would want in a leader. I choose to seek out great leaders and sprinkle just a little bit of me in there so that they can become their own person. Training people with the potential can be hard, but there is a right way to do it. And the key word is trust. Okay, think about a hero. Everybody loves the story about a hero. The best heroes are like strong and powerful. They overcome all obstacles. And the movies, they always show the heroes as victorious, no matter who the villain is. And we love heroes with superpowers like speed, strength, fighting ability. But no matter how great they are, we have yet to see a hero with the superpower of trust, right? But yet we still trust them. You see, trust, unlike superpowers, it isn't something that like we're born with or magically receive after we're bitten by a spider. Instead, trust is earned. The key to win people over is trust, and they trust us in order to come into, we have to get them to trust us in order to come into our way of thinking. And so when we trust people in our industry, we need to tell them the good, the bad, just like we spoke about before, right? And that means we have to be honest. We know that our industry is amazing, but it's, it's got its fair share of negatives too, just like all other industries. So talk about those things and train people with pure honesty. And if they feel that they can trust you, then they'll follow your lead. And it's always better to train a person before you train the skill, right? So again, I'm going to say that train the person before you train the skill, because it is such a waste to pour into a person and then find out 90 days later that they're driving away your people because their people skills suck. So train the person, the skills will come. I have to say that because so many people do it opposite. And know where your people are. What I mean by this is to perform a check on those people with potential. And maybe they may be great overall, but that doesn't mean that they're ready to lead people. Leaders have to be recognizable no matter where they are. If a person says that they stand for something, but does something opposite in their personal life, they're not the leader for you. Ask questions and find out where they are on their journey of life and where they want to be. And lastly, it's our duty as leaders to cultivate future leaders. We must do this, okay, to become, or we'll become extinct. right? So think about your previous leaders. Do you talk about them often? Do you reference them at least once a month? I mean, like, think about that. Drop that in the chat if you do. Do you reference your leader at least once a month? Okay. And when a future leader does not feel valued and heard, they might just surpass you and elevate to the top, right? So some of the key factors of being dissatisfied have an idea, but not, they feel like they have an idea, but they're not being heard. They have the knowledge and the determination, but no one is utilizing it. You see, all these things, right? I want us to go to the next slide, Melissa. Can you take me there? Okay, great. I want us to look at this, right? And this is me. Okay. I just want you to know that I was a person who did not feel like I was heard. I didn't feel like I was seen. I had all these great ideas, right? And this business that I was working with, they could have benefited from that, but they chose not to. So now I'm over here. Right? Can we go to the next slide, Melissa? Okay, now I want us to look at Monique Edwards. Monique Edwards is someone that I met in the DE&I class. This was back in 2020, and she's right there in the middle. This was the first class. It was an amazing class. She got so much out of this, and she got so many mentors and friends from this, right? Now, this is cultivating our leaders. As you see here, she's a capstone winner. The first one ever she won. She placed first place on that. And now there's different associations that are actually putting what she presented in motion. She became a speaker, and she's a pretty good speaker at that. She spoke at Apartmentalized. You see her here. She's with owners. Before that wasn't her. She wasn't hanging around with owners and assisting. And then here at the bottom, you see that she's bringing so many other people with her. She's bringing people into the industry. So this is what can happen. Okay. I just want us to take a look. If we do all these things that we know that we should do, if we say that we're going to do them and we pour into other leaders, then you will get trailblazers. Okay. Let's go to the next slide, please. I'm sure many of you know Miss Alex Yakiel, right? She will never be forgotten. She has created a legacy here. Okay. If you see here, she's been on the board. When it was time for her to step away, she was like, you know what? I want to do this. And so she created this foundation, the scholarship. And this is the NAAEI scholarship that hopefully a lot of you, if you have not applied for it, you are helping others to apply for it. You're telling them to go on board and apply because it's amazing. She's assisting other people she does not know. She's able to touch people and create this legacy to help people to get their CAM and their CAPs. So I'm going to leave us with this. Just remember that it's our duty to pour back into those coming up from behind, so keep your eyes open and never stop trying to make people great. That's it. Melissa, we can go back to you. Okay, now I've got some questions. Melissa asked me some questions, so now I'm going to ask her. The first one being, when helping someone to create their leadership pathway, when do you remove yourself from the process? And guys, if you could, put this in the chat too, we'd love to know your answer to that. Melissa, can you answer?
Absolutely. And Vanessa, please let us know if you see some incredible answers in the chat. For me, I've observed, I would have to take a cue from leaders that I learned from, is that you don't necessarily fully remove yourself. I think there are stages or progressions of leadership in the leadership relationship. I think in the beginning, you're more involved with checkpoints and coaching and cultivating. And then later on, I'll go more into the leadership styles. But in the beginning, you're more of a coach, a trainer, if you will. In the middle stage of that process, you're more of a mentor. So you shift from coach, meaning I'm holding you accountable. We're working on goals and actions together to accomplish a goal, right? But then I can mentor you when I step away, after I see that you are now more self-sufficient, self-aware, that you can now measure your own checkpoints without me having to point that out to you. And really, I'm essentially just mentoring you of finding out where you stuck, where are the gaps, and then nudging you along a bit with some wise advice. And then in terms of removal, I think I've witnessed this multiple times over in leadership and mentorship relationships when they come back and say, hey, now I feel like you're leading me in an area where I was once leading you. Kind of like the whole Mr. Miyagi syndrome, like when a student becomes the teacher. And you start to realize that, right? And so I think you never fully remove yourself because we're cultivating relationships that last, but you have stages of your leadership relationship.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%, Melissa. Additionally, I believe that it's important to bring more leaders to the table. You know, as they say, it takes a village to raise a child. The same goes for a leader, and people need to surround themselves with leaders in order to grow. So if you see someone that's a future trailblazer that, you know, here's a leader over here that would be beneficial to them, make that connection, make that introduction. Do we have any comments in chat on this?
No comments in the chat, but I was just going to kind of add my own in there. I definitely agree with Melissa. You never fully remove yourself simply because leadership is a quality that's never ending. You're constantly growing and evolving. And so just for me personally, there's so many leaders that I go back to just because they're developing their leadership skill set from their coaches and mentors as well. And there's always more to be able to be poured back down into.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And Melissa, I'm looking at the time and I really want to hear what you have to say on your slides. So if we could skip over the other slides and go to your section.
Awesome. So the third pathway here, legacy. Let me read this to you. And I want you to share how this makes you feel in the chat. The culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior that the leader is willing to tolerate. Meaning, what the leader accepts sets the tone for the organization. That sets the standard. That is where your legacy begins. We just showed Alex Jackie, and there are many other notable iconic leaders who've created legacy. And that does not start when we get near retirement or when we're at the latter years of our career. Your leadership legacy actually starts today. On how do you set the tone of excellence? I mentioned the book Radical Candor, and the reason I'm in love with that book so much is in chapter 1, the author Kim Scott gives an example of someone she thought was exemplary. I mean, highly noted superstar that she was recruiting for her company. Many of you may relate to this story. She goes on to say that upon his much anticipated hire and onboarding, in his first presentation, he bombed miserably and did not meet the standards or the reputation he had set for himself. And that very moment, she could read the room of her team and know that she needed to address it. But for fear of being criticized as a leader, she did not address his poor performance. This went on for several months and impacted and actually diminished. We talked about being a diminisher or a multiplier. It diminished the work ethic and the quality of work. We talked about, hey, you know, are you bringing your full capabilities? They began to hold back on capabilities, saying, well, if he doesn't have to do it, I'm not doing it either. And finally, she had to terminate him. And what he said in that moment, to not give the book away, he said, I thought you cared. Why did you wait so long to tell me? Which goes back to the statement. Is there behavior that, if not addressed, can spread like an infectious cancer among the team that changes the quality of work? But yet this is a key and essential team member who, if properly coached, guided, and mentored and given the truth, can be a better contributor to the overall mission. That sets the tone of your leadership and your legacy. So with that, if you are struggling or if you could relate to that story in any way, I want to introduce to you the 6 leadership styles to consider and where you fall. What I love about this is that it doesn't mean you have to select just one type of leadership style. You may have to adapt multiple of these, or as Chikora mentioned earlier, hire to the style that may be opposite of you, but best complements what is needed. That is the most unconventional thing. After all, we don't want an army of more of us, but a diverse team of people to fill the gaps of the organization. For me, you can just about guess that I'm a coaching leadership style. Chikora may be different, and Vanessa as well. So then with the three of us, we would have to assess the gaps and then hire executive, middle, and on-site leaders to fill and teach to or lead to the gap. That's what I leave with you about legacy. Lead to the gap so you elevate people to the area where they are the answer, and they have established a place of longevity in your organization by filling that gap. I'll say that again. Give them a place to stay and make them feel needed, and they remain with you to build their legacy. So what's your legacy? There's another part of leadership legacy that I want to introduce you to, and that's leadership language. Pause for a minute as we have been giving recognition to some of our notable favorites, recognizing our teams, our heroes across RPM Careers Week. Is there a leader that you've quoted this week that either you have worked for or they are leading you from afar? You may not know them personally, but their teachings, their lessons do inspire you. There's a language that they use. I'll give you an example. Dr. Debbie Phillips always ends every email with, "I'm enthusiastic" or "enthusiastically." So I adopted the language of a leader. If someone says at the end of an email, a salutation or greeting, for me, it's "I'm enthusiastic." Why? Because that impacted me. Is there language or words that you use that were adopted or passed down from someone who previously was leading you? Those words are the way that we pass down leadership language. There's storytelling, or there's stories about your career and property management that are legacy stories that teach, educate, and inspire. That is a part of your legacy that starts today. As we're in this RPM Careers Week, I want you to sit with the challenge of, what is my legacy in my RPM career? And so I'm going to actually skip these. Well, I won't skip the questions. We have time for one. What are 3 words that are in your leadership language? Think about that and drop them in the chat. Just 3 words that if your team were to quote you today, they would say, "My leader always says this, this, and this." Because if they can quote you, that means they follow you. If they can quote you, that means they follow you. And if they follow you, they become an echo of your leadership style and language. So what you say does matter. Vanessa, I think we have some great ones coming through the chat. What do we see for in terms of leadership language?
Absolutely. Stephanie's got "done listed." Mackenzie said, "I appreciate you." It's amazing. Jennifer, honest, transparent, humble. She said, "I also say dang too much."
That's funny.
Wendy said, "Trust yourself."
Yeah, genius zone is one of mine. I adopted it again from a leader and mentor, and it just stuck. But this is how our legacy spreads, because people echo our leadership language. Trust yourself. You got this. That's really good. And then the second one, which leadership style appeals to you the most? I'm going to pull that slide back up and just drop it in the chat. It's important to be aware of your leadership style if you were not already, so that as you identify, create succession plans, and blaze a trail, you know where you need to hire or fill the gap. So let me pull it back up. What's your leadership style? And then is there a leadership style on here that you're lacking in your organization that you need? Give you a moment for that in the chat. Chikora or Vanessa, is there a leadership style you identify with the most?
Well, I'm a blend, democratic, visionary, and coaching. I would say it's Chikora all day.
Mhm, mhm.
I would definitely say I'm pace setting, probably a little bit of commanding, mixed with some visionary in there.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I need more commanders because I'm more of coaching, democratic, and visionary. I'm much more on the other side of the scale, and that's important. So if you guys want to take a screenshot of that, by all means, take it and apply it to blaze your new trails. Let's see, what do we have in the chat, Vanessa?
I see a lot of pace setting. Wendy's got pace setting. We have another Wendy she's got a blend of pace setting and visionary, affiliative, democratic, pace setting and democratic together.
Awesome. Well, listen, here's a screenshot to take with you and a challenge if you choose to accept it. Some actionable insights to take with you. Who are the leaders that you watch from afar? Meaning, I don't know them personally, I may not work with them, but their words, their messaging, it inspires you. And give them a shout out. Tag them, introduce yourself, and nurture that relationship. The second one, who are the leaders you learn from up close? And I'm not just talking about leading up, but also leadership at every level. Is there a leasing consultant who definitely exemplifies leadership and that you learn from in your organization? Is there a facilities or maintenance team member that has shown you how to take the charge and really lead more effectively? Give them some praise and acknowledge them as well. And the last one, who is the leader that you want to become? Is there a leader that you see as a model example and you want to potentially work with them to mentor, to learn from? I encourage you to nurture that relationship as well. And lastly, I'll leave you with this quote. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Your legacy as a leader, when people look back at you at the time that they've spent with you, they will absolutely remember what they felt in your presence.
Mhm.
What will that be? What will they echo? And what will be your legacy? So with that, which path do you choose? Number one, the path of courage and compassion. Number two, to cultivate and train. Or number three, to build your legacy and have a solid leadership language? Or do you need a blended approach to combine them and get where you're going as a trailblazing leader? So we turn it back over to you, Stephanie and Vanessa, and we open it up for questions in our remaining time today.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for your time. This was such an incredible session. So many awesome takeaways and things to think about. And we appreciate you all so much. So before we close, just a couple of NAA updates. As Melissa mentioned, it is RPM Careers Week here at NAA. It's Thursday, but there's still time to get involved. So you can check out this link to see how you can participate between today and tomorrow. Next slide. And I know this was also mentioned too. So we have 2 diversity, equity, and inclusion opportunities available. The call is open right now for the Alex Jacku DE&I Scholarship, as well as the Innovation in DEI grant. The deadline to apply for both of those opportunities is July 29th. So get in those applications today. And last slide, we have a webinar coming up on August 9th, Leadership at All Levels, Moxie versus Mastery. So if you have the time, come join us. And that's everything from me.
Awesome. Well, if no other questions, thank you so much, everyone, for spending your afternoon with us. We hope that this encourages you to be an unconventional trailblazer, and we look forward to seeing the comments that you share. And don't forget to stay connected with all of the content shared for DE&I this week as well. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.